rise and fall of To Catch a Predator. How Chris Hansen scammed fans and completely ruined his reputation. So here is how Chris Hansen scammed fans. After many failed spin-offs of the original hit TCAP, a Kickstarter suddenly dropped for a new television program called Hansen vs. Predator. This program would follow the typical TCAP formula of men coming over to a sting house thinking they were going to meet a person not of age for intimacy, only to be met by Chris Hansen and then arrested by law enforcement right afterwards. This time around, a new watchdog group would play the online decoys as the OG group had dissolved years earlier. The Kickstarter was aiming for a $400,000 goal, but after months of fundraising the campaign lowered the goal to $75,000, eventually reaching $89,000. The Kickstarter promised mugs, t-shirts, and other assorted merch to backers. The sting was filmed in Fairfax County, Connecticut, leading to the arrest of 10 men. Afterwards, with the footage of the sting supposedly on the way, Hansen became the host of Crime Watch Daily, a syndicated true crime show. Crime Watch Daily picked up the Hansen vs. Predator sting for their show, and it quickly became their most popular segment, with the Jeff Sokol interview racking up over 55 million views on YouTube and randomly going viral on TikTok seemingly once every couple months. The unedited footage of these interviews and arrests was apparently still on the way to Kickstarter backers, but that, just like the promised merch, was nowhere in sight. Soon, backers began flooding the comments of the Kickstarter page demanding to know where their money was going. Hansen promised backers would receive their awards by December of 2015, but no one had gotten anything by August of 2016. You deal with Kickstarter to help these people out. To get screwed over by someone you've seen on TV. Kind of hurts, said one backer. We got scammed. We really need to get a hold of some news outlets to set up a sting on Chris Hansen. When he shows up, we can instruct him to have a seat and pull all of the updates they promised us and grill the crap out of them. It really is sad that they screwed us over so badly, says another. Eventually, backers began receiving their rewards, albeit a long time after being promised them. One backer said he had his mug arrive 2.5 years after it was supposed to have shipped. Some backers, including myself, never got their rewards at all. What was most infuriating to fans during this protracted dance between backers and Hansen were his repeated assurances that rewards were right around the corner and that the footage of the sting was coming up soon. Many fans of his earlier work couldn't help but walk away feeling like they got scammed by someone they once looked up to, or at least enjoyed the work of a lot. So on to Chris Hansen's arrest and his other scams. In the summer of 2017, Hansen wrote a $13,000 check to a company making promotional items for him for Hansen vs. Predator. However, this check bounced. After months of back and forth, Chris wrote another check to this company in April of 2018, but this check also bounced. A felony warrant was then issued for his arrest in Connecticut for writing bad checks. Chris turned himself in, and though the case was eventually dropped, it still left many fans shaking their heads at the man who once wore a 5-digit Rolex on his wrist during his Dateline days. There is a plethora of other shady stuff Chris has done in the years since, including shilling for a scam Escobar folding phone being sold by literally Pablo Escobar's brother. YouTuber Theo Von flew Chris out to Las Vegas to appear on a show, and while there, Chris allegedly racked up a huge hotel and spa bill expecting Theo to pay for it and argued with his team about it. Chris was evicted from his Manhattan apartment after not paying rent, and his Connecticut home was foreclosed on by the bank. Not to mention his exorbitant credit card debt. Needless to say, it's apparent Chris has a bad handle on his financial situation. Chris launched a website for his Hansen vs. Predator series and promised new high-quality investigations for a subscription of $90 a year. After one video, however, the site fell dormant despite Chris promising new videos for months afterwards, and instead started a new series on his YouTube channel that was universally panned for the low production quality and that the men caught were arrested before the interview with Chris, leading to rather boring and uninteresting videos. Bizarrely, Chris Hansen also started investigating YouTuber and alleged Gr Omer Onissian for his inappropriate relationships with fans. Investigating in quotes because many felt Hansen had unfairly jumped onto the story after others had done all the work, and Hansen just joined in to take the story and sell it as a documentary to Discovery+. This culminated in an almost comedic video where Chris arrives at Onissian's house with a camera crew just for Onissian to call 911. Just to emphasize how bizarre this is, Onissian withdrew a lawsuit against Chris Hansen after he accidentally served a totally different man named Chris Hansen the papers. So where are Chris and the investigations now? Chris appeared briefly on The Boys Season 2, which, good for him for getting that bag in a respectable way, I guess. In 2020 he started a podcast titled Preds I Caught. Each week he takes a different man caught in one of the stings he's been a part of and does a reading of their chat log, an overview of his confrontation with them, and what they've been up to since the sting. Formulaic to a fault, it's still somewhat interesting to hardcore fans to hear Chris read chat logs uncensored for once, and occasionally but rarely he divulges some actual new and interesting information. Just recently on Thanksgiving Day, his new series titled Takedown with Chris Hansen started airing on the true crime streaming service he's a part of, True Blue. Despite many in the fandom wondering if this was a scam originally, True Blue is a real service and the new show is also real. This series follows the more traditional TCAP and Hansen vs. Predator format of Chris confronting a suspect before arrest, though most of the men immediately try to leave. Probably because the sting house is an empty double-wide trailer with a visible GoPro camera mounted on the fridge that Chris has to pick up off the floor and put back on top at one point. A long departure from the TCAP days of renting out massive multi-million-dollar mansions with dozens of expensive hidden cameras. Chris also just this Monday announced upcoming live shows in Las Vegas where he promises to record a podcast with the audience, show some never-before-seen footage, do a Q&A, and have some meet and greets. Some in the fandom speculating this is a test for a national tour. Maybe expect PredatorCon to come to a city near you, complete with people cosplaying as their favorite registered offender from the shows. My entitled stepdaughter sold my family heirloom jacket behind my back, so I sold her birthday present and made her cry. Although my wife and I have a mostly beautiful relationship, there is one topic we have never seen eye to eye on, and that's my stepdaughter Lacey. I have tried bonding with her and getting closer to her. But this has never worked however, as Lacey's mother has raised her in such a spoiled manner, that Lacey is now an entitled teenager who demands everything goes her way and refuses to take no for an answer. She has been suspended from school for bullying a much poorer kid in her class previously. When I pressed her about it and tried to explain how wrong it was to verbally ridicule him in front of the whole class, she literally refused to accept that she was in the wrong. Her mother then stepped in defending her, telling me, "You're not her dad, don't act like it." She then proceeded to take Lacey upstairs and they had a talk, but I'm not sure about what. All I know is Lacey is yet to admit that she was in the wrong. This is just one example of her entitlement. She is now 16 years old and seems to get more spoiled every year. I have tried carefully broaching this subject with her mother, but I seem to get shot down every time. This behavior has definitely strained my relationship with Lacey. Well, my relationship with her, which was already not as good as it could be, went completely south last week. So last week was her birthday, and her mother and I got her the latest iPhone like she wanted. I got a lukewarm thanks off her, and her mother and her went to celebrate by themselves for the entire day. This kind of hurt. I was the one who paid for that iPhone and I get excluded. But that wasn't the real kicker. The real kicker happened when they came home in the evening. They both sat me down and went on to explain that they needed to talk with me. My wife opened up by saying she feels that I'm being way too cheap in regards to my allowance with Lacey. She said that the $75 a week that I give her was way too little for someone of her age and that I can definitely afford to double her allowance. I asked Lacey if she was willing to do chores around the house or cook dinner every now and then for her mother and I in order to increase her allowance, and Lacey said no. She shouldn't have to. She should simply get the higher allowance because she is 16 now. I told her that's not how the world works, and that's when her mother jumped in, giving out to me and literally claiming that this is proof I don't care about Lacey. I got mad at that, so I asked Lacey, "Who do you think bought you that new phone?" And she replied, "It was my birthday, that's the bare minimum." I responded, "You know my parents were dirt poor and we didn't celebrate birthdays. The only thing they gave me was a roof over my head and something to eat before bed each night. That's the bare minimum." She then responded saying my parents should have tried harder in life. I saw red, and I was about to verbally go off on them both, but I restrained myself and told them I was going upstairs. While leaving, my wife tried to ask me about the allowance, and I yelled that the answer was no. I feel bad for yelling, but I was so angry in the moment. That all happened last week, and for the next few days the atmosphere in the house was very tense. My wife and Lacey did not talk to me much, and vice versa. Well, this morning I woke up and I felt a compelling urge to go to a Christmas market as they had just opened up. I love going to these things, Lacey and my wife do not, so I figured I would go by myself. I got ready and went to put on my jacket. A jacket I only wear during the winter time and very rarely. A jacket passed down to me by my father, a jacket that is 5 generations old. It is made with high-quality materials, real fur and leather, absolutely enormous. It probably has a market value of around $900, $1,000, but to me it is priceless. After spending a lot of time trying to find this jacket and being unable to, I decided to ask my wife if she had seen it. My wife reluctantly said no at first, but she hesitated before answering. I asked her again, she hesitated again and said no, then immediately tried changing the subject. Something was fishy here, so I kept pressing. She finally cracked when I threatened to go leave the house for a few days. She admitted that Lacey, being furious with me after I told her no to her allowance request, decided to sell my jacket and keep the money. I went blind with rage. I asked her first where she sold it, and my wife told me she sold it online and through where. I was irate. I went upstairs to where Lucy was sleeping, but I had no intention of waking her up. I simply took the new phone I got her and put it in my pocket. I then went downstairs to my wife, who kept begging for me not to punish Lucy. I told her not to worry and that I'm not going to DOD anything, and told her I'm heading to the market to clear my head and enjoy my day. And enjoy my day I did. I headed out alone and pawned her new iPhone. I got just over $500 for it, way less than I paid, but I did not care. I then spent the entire 500 big ones on a day to myself. I bought stuff at the markets, I went to a Michelin star restaurant, I went to a spa. I had a great day and came home with $11. Throughout this whole day I kept getting angry messages and calls from Lacey and my wife asking where her phone was, and I told them not to worry. I'll explain everything when I get home. So when I got home I was greeted with them yelling at me, and especially Lacey, demanding I give her the phone back. I wish you all could see the look on her face when I told her I pawned it. Priceless. Truly priceless. Her mother started screaming, of course, that I'm a selfish a-hole for doing this. I told them both that this is what they get for selling something priceless to me behind my back. Lacey kept yelling at me that it was just a stupid jacket. I reminded Lacey that things can hold more value to them than their price tag, and she got even more mad. Then I told her that I will also be taking the money she got for selling my jacket and keeping it to myself. She started to cry when I said that and ran upstairs. By this point, her mother washed quiet and was sitting at the kitchen table. After Lacey bolted up in tears, I sat down with my wife and we had a long and painful talk. She admitted that what Lacey did was wrong, and she admitted that she spent years parenting her the wrong way. I asked her what she wanted to do and she said we must have a serious talk with Lacey, and I agreed. Lacey has been upstairs the whole evening, and my wife and I plan to talk to her tomorrow. My crazy wife kept harassing and stalking our daughter, which resulted in her getting arrested. She's now mad at me for not backing her up. My wife and I have a 23-year-old daughter, who is not too close to us. The reason behind it is my wife. My wife has been obsessive about our daughter all her life. She had phone trackers on my daughter's phone till the day she moved out. She would follow her to shops, stalk wherever she was at, and in one case came into a cinema that my daughter was at just to make sure that our daughter was where she said she was. Due to this, our daughter doesn't really tell us about her social or love life. Even when we ask, she just gives us vague answers. My wife hates this. She feels like she is entitled to know about our daughter's private life, even intimacy life details. Well, it turns out that for about 6 months, our daughter has been seeing a 43-year-old man. I don't know if they are dating or friends with benefits. I'm not sure, but my wife found this out when she was helping our daughter move into her house. She had gotten a copy of her key, so when my wife wants, she can go into her house, and she doesn't need to call our daughter to let her know she can just walk in. At first, I didn't know about the key, but when I found out, I was in shock. My wife found out about my daughter dating the older guy by secretly following my daughter around to see where she goes and tracking her phone. She followed them back to her house, and she demanded to know what was going on. However, my daughter told her to leave. She refused, and my daughter said if she didn't leave, she would call the police. She left, came home, and told me everything. Obviously I don't want my daughter to date a man who's 20 years older than her. I think it's gross, but I also think that what my wife did was wrong and an invasion of privacy. However, my wife told me that she's her mother, and because she's only 23, our daughter's business is also her business. I told my wife that our daughter is an adult and lives on her own. If she wants to do this, we may not agree with it, but there is nothing we can do. My wife didn't agree and said, no, that doesn't mean she can date an older man if she wants. I didn't want to fight with my wife over this, so I just said, okay. My wife continued to stalk her and enter her house without asking, and she also stalked and threatened to injure the older man because of this. Because of this, my daughter called the police, and when I told the cops about the situation, they understood it to some extent and gave my wife a warning. They told us what she did was stalking and harassment, and that we needed to leave our daughter alone if she called them again. They would have to arrest my wife. After this, my wife continued to harass our daughter and her boyfriend. She showed up on her dates at her house. My daughter then got a restraining order against her mother. I told my wife she needed to stop. All she was doing was making her want to be with the man even more. I told my wife she was breaking the law and that if she continued this, she might go to jail. She asked me if we should give her an ultimatum. Her idea was to tell her that if she continued to see the man, we would never talk to her again, and she wouldn't be a part of our family. My wife said our daughter could be part of our family after she broke up with him. I told her this wasn't a good idea because if he is abusive, we shouldn't push her away, we should still keep a line of communication open, and I told her we shouldn't use our parental influence to try and force her into doing what she does or doesn't want to do. After I told my wife that, she said, so we should just allow our daughter to do whatever she wants, and we should just accept that? I got frustrated, and I just said whatever and left. I texted my daughter, asking her if I could see her. She said okay, and we met for lunch. I asked her why she was seeing a man old enough to be her father, and she told me she was just into much older men. I tried telling her about the red flags of dating someone older, but she still wanted to do it. I told her that I didn't agree with the relationship, but I would support her and be there for her if she needed it. My daughter said, thank you. After that, I told my wife about the meeting with our daughter, and my wife got mad at me for doing that. She said, we are supposed to have a united front. I told her there was nothing we could do except be there for her, but my wife is still adamant about doing something. I told her our daughter got a restraining order against her. If she keeps this up, she will go to jail. I tried telling her that, and the cops who came by our house tried telling her that, but she still didn't listen. She went to my daughter's house and basically broke in and yelled at our daughter, telling her, you better end this relationship now. I don't care what you want or what you are into. Because of the yelling, one of our neighbors called the police, and my daughter told the cops everything. The cops asked if my daughter wanted to press charges, and she did, so my wife was arrested. She was charged with violating a restraining order, breaking and entering, assault, and harassment. I paid my wife's bail, but she still has a trial. My wife claimed that the cops were racist for arresting her. We are a black family. I got frustrated, and I told her no. She was arrested for breaking multiple laws. I told her she should have lied to me and wouldn't be in this situation, but she got mad at me. My wife also got mad at me for telling her it was her fault she got arrested.